I'm Jeremy Pyle. I'm a plastic surgeon in Raleigh. I've been in practice for almost 2 years now, and about a month into practice realized that what I'd known in residency was very different than what I need to know in real life. And so I've been working with the NCMS, and we've been working together to try and figure out a way to provide residents and young physicians some guidelines and some expert opinion, if you will, about how to handle the first couple of years of practice and how to handle the transition. Our talk today will be with Billy Gwaltney. Billy's an insurance professional from Charlotte, where he runs his own firm called Professional Planning Group, PPG. Billy's been working in insurance for about 20 years. His expertise has been in disability for a long time, and so he's here to talk about disability. So thanks for joining us, Billy.
Sure, thanks for having me.
From the minute that you start having a conversation with someone about insurance, disability comes up. And the question that I've found most frequent is about disability and own-oc, or own occupation. Can you help me understand that a little better?
What you're looking at when you're talking about definitions determine when you get paid, how much you get paid, or if you get paid. And there are several different variations of that that can be structured any number of ways depending on whether or not your employer's paying for it, whether or not you're paying for it. The three general, and there are nuances to this, but the three main categories, the first one is any occupation, and that says that you're considered disabled if you cannot perform the duties of any occupation that you're reasonably educated and trained to do.
That's the broadest definition.
That's the broadest definition. That's essentially the Social Security definition. Okay. The second one is what's called own occupation and not working. And this is where there can be some confusion. It says you're disabled if you can't do the material and substantial duties of your occupation and you don't earn income from any other source or earn income from another job from that point forward, ever. Okay, so you're disabled if you can't do surgery, but if you ever earn income from another source, it either reduces or eliminates your benefit. And so that's not the best definition. It's obviously better than the any occupation definition. The ideal definition is what's called true specialty own occupation. And that says that you're disabled if you can't do the material duties of your occupation, regardless of what you then go do from that point forward. So an example of that is that if you can't do surgery because of a disability, you could teach, you could consult.
And that would not count against my disability filing.
That's correct. That's correct. So you would still remain fully disabled from the policy standpoint and from the benefit standpoint, and you're able to go do other things if the opportunity arises. And in our experience, we found that to be an important definition to have if you can get it, because not all disabilities are catastrophic. There is the probability or the chance that you could be disabled from your particular specialty that you're trained to do, but still bring something of value to the market.
So if I'm talking with someone about a plan, or if I've already got a plan, how do I know that the own occupation definition is what I want, not necessarily what the broker or the insurance salesman wants?
The ideal way, the best way, the only way to fully know what you have, assuming you have insurance, is to read the policy. You've got to read the policy. You need to read the full definition.
And I don't want to read the policy.
Well, that's a great point, and that's where working
because I'm a doctor.
Right, and that's where working with someone that you trust is vital, because there are differences. You want to get this part of your financial life exactly right. Your biggest asset is never going to be your house, and it's never probably going to be your retirement account. It's your ability to get up every day and do what you do. There is a lot riding on whether or not you can perform your job the way you're being compensated to perform it. And so if you can't because of a disability, what happens? There's so many nuances to what can happen. What happens if you're partially disabled? What happens if you recover? What happens if you can do this occupation, or can't do this occupation, but you can do another occupation? Those details matter. And so making sure you get that right. If you don't want to read the policy, short of reading the policy, is finding someone that through word of mouth or through friends, and I know you're granted, you want to find out that there's someone you can trust, because that's a big part.
So if it says one thing, that's it. There's no wiggle room.
That's true.
If it says own occupation, meaning strictly defined own occupation, then it is. If it says occupation specific or other things.
Well, the way it's going to be written typically is it's going to say you're disabled if you can't perform the material duties of your occupation. And then there's usually a sentence after that. It either has a period, where that's it,
Got it.
or it'll say, and is not engaged in any other gainful occupation.
So if I don't want to read the whole thing and I find that sentence, that's the critical sentence in the own
If there was
occupation
one thing
definition.
you needed to make sure was right, that
Right.
would be the part to make sure.
The question then comes up is, when do I get disability insurance? I know that the day I started internship, it would be ideal if I had a plan in place that I could afford, but I couldn't afford it. I mean, I could afford it, but I bought other things. And so I didn't have it. And things worked out fine for me. And I didn't have to draw on it. I would have been spending money that I didn't need to spend. But so when is the ideal time to get disability insurance? Or what is the advantage of doing it early rather than, you know, winging it for one more year?
Great question. And I run into this all the time. I work with residents and fellows, a lot of them, and tight budgets are pretty much a given. At the end of the day, it comes down to prioritizing risk. What is your greatest exposure, and what risk can you put off and essentially self-insure until later? And it's really a personal call. Now, I can bring statistics to the table. I can bring information to the table and just say, based on where you are, based on what's riding on your ability to do what you do, disability insurance ranks up pretty high, because there is a reasonable, compared to other risks, there's a much greater chance of disability than, say, dying or other types of risks that you can perhaps put off. At the end of the day, you got to figure out a way to pay for that. And that's where working with someone who specializes in it should be able to help you get some discounts that are pretty substantial, that'll cover, will go a lot longer for you as far as...
Are those permanent?
They are permanent.
So if I get a plan as a resident, I get a discount that I won't get 2 years later as an attending?
Very possibly. Now, sometimes if you're with a big hospital system, an attending can get a similar discount, but oftentimes they can't. And so you're right. You want to make sure you do that before you leave if you can. The other nuance to that is making sure that if you do get coverage, that you don't have to start out with the maximum amount. It's not an all or nothing. Okay, so right now the maximum for a resident that's not graduating is $5,000 a month. You could do 2,500, you could do 2, you could do some lesser amount, at least get it locked in so that you're covered in the meantime. At the same time, if you do it right, you can have these future increase options, which are the ability to add coverage in the future as your income goes up without having to go back through any medical questions or anything. And if you do that, you can still end up in the future where you would ideally want to be and not shortchange yourself in the meantime. The mistake is to assume that nothing's going to happen to you while you're a resident. You know, your chance of disability is only going to happen as an attendant.
Well, it happens to other people.
And it happens to other people. And you were right. There is a very good chance that you're going to be fine, just like you. And of the things to prioritize, as far as things to save money or to allocate resources to as a resident or fellow, disability insurance probably is towards the top if you're looking objectively at your exposure.
His expert was Billy Gwaltney. He's an insurance expert specifically dealing today with disability insurance. We talked about a relatively small number of things, but in a fair amount of detail and in depth. Probably the most important thing we talked about was the importance of an own occupation specific definition in your plan. It's a complicated issue, but really comes down to your understanding and willingness to read your contract and make sure that the words that you need in your contract are in your contract. It's important that you understand your contract to the extent that if you ever were to need disability insurance and it's not perfect, then the purpose of it is lost. The other thing we talked about was the timing for insurance and how you can fit insurance into your life plan and your financial plan. Why it may be one of those things you'd rather have early and delay your other funding of other issues until later on in your career. Billy was a good resource, but there are other resources available. There's some websites attached to this, and our online objectives will help you understand what we outlined and why it's important. If there's anything else we can do, please send me an email or contact the NCMS. Thank you.